Chumo Shengguo Temple. Leading up from lesser peaks, the trail winds above vine-covered slopes. The lands of Wu end at the shore. The mountains of Jue begin across the river. Ancient trees merge with blue mist. The distant sky joins the white waves. The city wall is so close below. Singers and flutes muffle the bell. So we continue with some Buddhist monk poetry, and this is the only sample we're going to see of the poetry of Chumo. So as usual, let's begin with a brief biographical profile of Chumo. So he was basically a late 9th century poet monk, so living in the last years of the Tang dynasty. And he came originally from the Wujue region, which more or less encompasses the southeastern seaboard coast of modern-day China, including the area of Nanjing, and where the Yangtze River throws its water into the sea. So Chumo was an early friend of the more prominent poet and painter monk Wanshu, of whom we've had occasion to talk, and the two were said to have cut off impurities together. He was also a close friend of another famous late Tang poet, Luo Jin, with whom he traveled in the Hangzhou area in the mid-9th century. In fact, this poem that I have read is located in the vicinity of Hangzhou. About the friendship of Luo Jin and Chumo, an anecdote which is related to the poem that we have just read is related. So when Luo Jin read Chumo's couplet, "The land of Wu ends as I reach the river, the Jue mountains are many on the other shore," he exclaimed, "This is my couplet. How did the master come up with it?" Presumably they had written the same couplet separately. The late Tang was a very tumultuous time. So during the Huangchao rebellion of the 880s, Chu fled to Mount Lu, which was Lushan, a hotbed of poet-monk activity, and to which he had made a pilgrimage earlier in life. He likely died in the first decade of the 10th century. Early catalogues record a one-fascicle poetry collection titled The Monk Chumo's Collection. 8 of his poems have survived and are found in the Chuang Tangxi. And this information is taken from the Digital Dictionary of Buddhism, and written by Tom Mazanek, with sources Fu Xuanzong and Wu Renchen. You can consult it there if you wish. Okay, so this is a curious poem. What's it about? Well, the form it's from what I can see, is a pentasyllabic regulated poem. It's meant to describe a temple from its title, but it's very interesting that the Shengguo temple does not actually appear in the poem. We get in the first couplets a description of the landscape that surrounds the temple, or the way leading to the temple, the surroundings of said temple, the nature landscapes around it, and the closeness of a city to the temple, more specifically the closeness of Hangzhou. But we don't get any description of the temple itself, except very indirectly by the bell sound that is being muffled by singers and flutes in the last line. So the poem could be described, it could be called descriptive. It's an example of descriptive poetry, more of the surroundings of the Shengguo temple area, the natural beauty of the area surrounding Hangzhou, which is the town with lakes very close to the sea, but also to the Yangtze River Valley. This is a very famous town. It was already famous in the Tang, where it was, a provincial place. I think poet Bai Juji was actually a prefect of Huangzhou at some time. It was a little bit of a Venice of the East with lots of lakes, but it would really rise to prominence during the Song dynasty. During the Northern Song, I think the great poet Su Dongpo was also a prefect at Hangzhou, but it really came into prominence during the Southern Song, so approximately from the 13th, 14th centuries, when it became the capital of the Southern Song dynasty under the name Linan, and the most populated city in China at the moment. Its geographical location, it seems, is a bit complicated. It's very close to mountains, and so although it's a beautiful place, it didn't have that much space for expansion, which explains the anecdote, or the image that appears at the end of the poem. Like, the city was built in quite elevated terrain and going up, which means the top of the walls of the city would have been pretty close to maybe a Buddhist temple in the mountains outside. And Hangzhou, wonderful city, you can still visit it today. If you ever go there, I would recommend seeing its famous lakes, and it has a museum of Chinese seals, a Xiling Museum, which I hope to be able to see one day. Okay, back to the poem. As I said, it feels like a pretty conventional example of regulated poem. There isn't any clear element of Buddhist symbolism or imagery, except for the presence absence of the temple itself. Yeah. So Chumo would have written this poem at the moment at which he was departing from Hangzhou, and probably going to Lushan. And we get, as we said, the vision from the Shengguo temple at the summit of the Fenghuangshan outside Hangzhou's southern gate. To the southeast, the Zhengtang River marked the border between the ancient states of Wu and Yue. They had been important kingdoms during the warring states in ancient China. And the Qiantang River there flows into Hangzhou Bay. To the northwest would have been the city's West Lake, which was already a popular spot with revelers in the lake town. Okay, so as usual, let's take a look at the poem couplet by couplet. First couplet. Leading up from lesser peaks, the trail winds above vine-covered slopes. So the first line already locates us high up into the sky. We are in a place that is leading up from lesser peaks. So already deep in the mountains, the poem starts by locating us high. And yet, even at this high elevation, there's still a trail that keeps winding up and up and up above vine-covered slopes. So typical images of mountains, of a natural landscape, of a thin trail going up, and of this ascendancy, which this going up, which is always, it's a lot of times very symbolic in Chinese poetry, where ascending to a high place usually connotes an extension of your spiritual, not only your physical sight, your insight. So we continue with the second couplet, which is the first of the parallelistic couplet, and which expands the view. So you could say that the first couplet zooms in into the winding path in the mountains and nothing else. The second one expands our view to the region that is at the foot of the mountain, and the geographical regions which are mentioned. The land of Wu ends at the shore. The mountains of Jue begin across the river. So the parallelism is very obvious here. Land, mountains, Wu, Jue, ends, begins, shore, river, at the shore, across the river. So it feels, like very, very effect, very, very carefully crafted. But, it does depict the fact that this area is indeed at the confluence of the old territories of Wu and Yue, and it's a land of water and mountains because, the water, the river, and the sea are pretty close, and lakes. But at the same time, this is a mountainous area. So, you have very, very high mountains surrounding the territory. Third couplet, which is also parallelistic, and it seems to zoom back in. So in the first couplet, we had this trail going up. Now we have two sides of nature. You could say the second couplet depicts the political, cultural geography. The third couplet depicts the landscape, the natural geography, with this merging of mountain and water that has already been hinted at in the previous two couplets. So ancient trees merge with blue mist. The distant sky joins the white waves. So this is a very, very well crafted and also very typical type of parallelistic couplet, because not only do you have the perfect parallelism, ancient trees, distant sky, merge, join, blue mist, white waves. You also have a lot of contrastive elements. So, like the first line of this couplet puts the focus on the horizontal images, probably. So you have ancient trees. Well, ancient trees would be very vertical if they're ancient because they would be old. But you have these trees merging with blue mist. So this is more like a horizontal tapestry, a horizontal tableau, where you would imagine this painting with lots of trees, perhaps, and the mist mixing, diffuminating, making some of them disappear. Yeah, so you have a misty background where the shapes of some trees are more apparent than others, and where they get diffuminated and melt into that background. So there's mountains, there's trees, and there's mist in high mountains. The next line, the distant sky joins the white waves. That's clearly more vertical. So it establishes this up and down axis, and the picture would be here a very far away sky high up, but it's the same color, the same tones as the white waves well below into the sea. So you've got this merging also, and this time it's not a merging of trees and mist, it's a merging of waves and sky. And again, the emphasis is, this vertical view. So verticality and ascendancy have been hammered in all through the poem, and they will be again hammered in the last couplet. The city wall is so close below, singers and flutes muffle the bell. So again, we have this intermingling, which seems so prevalent in the area of Hangzhou and Shengguo Temple. We had the merging of sky and sea. We had the merging of trees and mist. We had the merging of Wu and Yue. And now we got this merging of sounds. This is an oral image. But also visual, because there's the city wall. So the city wall is very close. Even though we are very high up in the mountains, the city wall is close, because, as I said, the city wall and the city of Hangzhou extended into mountainous areas. So the city wall is so close that there is another intermingling. The singers and flutes, that is the sounds of pleasure and partying and feasting down in the city, are so strong and so close that the temple bell feels muffled by this revelry coming from down. And there's this also mixture between, the civil and the religious, the secular and pleasurable, and the religious and transcendent and mystical, as epitomized by the bell, and this present but absent Shengguo temple all through the poem. So overall, quite a nice poem. I had already found the last couplet, if I remember well, in a history of the Song dynasty, when describing precisely the city of Hangzhou and how it was so close to the mountains and growing into the mountains, and this meant it was, a place of narrow lanes and overbuilt housing. So overall, a very nice poem, and also culturally and historically significant as well.